Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Last segment we started talking about fingering charts and I started showing you some fingerings. I'm going to continue with that today, but I thought before I get started with that I want to show you some fingering charts from books because the music books, the instruction books usually have them. So I'm going to start out with a book like this. This is an old book. It was published about 50 years ago. And it does have a fingering chart in the back. I'm going to show it to you, but I want to show you some other things first in here. This is an older book, and a lot of the pictures in the book, I think, were taken from the Middle Ages. They are really old, and I don't know as a child would ever be interested in some of the pictures that are in here. For example, this one, but you've got to remember, this was published 50 years ago. And all of those pictures are old. Now, the pictures of the instruments, and they do have a few here, are really excellent. I'm just kind of flipping through to see toward the beginning they have. Well, let me show you this picture. This is a picture, a sketch. It's not a picture. It's a sketch of a person playing a recorder. The one thing that's wrong with it, and I don't know why they ever included it, is the fact that you should never cross your legs when you're playing an instrument. If you're playing brass and if you're playing woodwinds, you don't cross your legs when you play. You play with your feet flat on the floor. And the reason for that is as soon as you start crossing your legs, it stops some of the airflow to the heart, to the lungs, and it cuts off air supply. It's a problem with the diaphragm that you use in tonguing and so forth. So really, it would be a good sketch if only both feet were on the floor. But I hate to have a student see this and think that it's all right to cross their legs when they play, because it's really not all right. You don't have the air supply that you think you've got. I'm trying to find a picture, I didn't mark them all, of some of the instruments, because they have at least one picture in here of a really good picture of the different types of recorders. But I'm not going to spend any time on it, because if I can't find it, I don't want to be wasting my time. Here's a good sketch of a recorder right here. Now, what I like about that, it's kind of on a slant, but you can see on the side where all the tone holes come. It's like they've been kind of cut out. And it is a good picture. It's a very good picture of a recorder. You can see it, and it is a sketch, but they did a very good job on that sketch, and they labeled the thumb holes, and they labeled the tone holes. So that is a good picture. Other pictures, there's one I want to find, and I didn't mark it this morning, but as I say, I'm not going to go through the whole book to find it either. It is a book. It's an instruction book. Well, here's one right here. They do have a number of pictures of instruments like this, and what's good about them is you can see the comparative sizes. Most people are playing soprano recorders, and that's what I'm teaching from basically. But there are very large recorders, and there are some that are tiny. And when they do show a picture of them, and then you can see the comparison of the sizes quite well. That is a good picture. And so if I could find more of those pictures, I'd use them. Now let me show you the fingering chart, because that's in the back of the book. Most instruction books have the fingering chart. And all a fingering chart is showing you, by graphing it out, what you play and how you play it. So this is the beginning of the fingering chart. And you don't see the fingerings, except it's explaining how you use it. If a hole is open, it's a key that you don't press down and press your finger on. If the hole is blackened in, then that's one that you make sure that you cover. And it explains all of that. And then we get to the fingering chart. It's a couple pages long. And here we go. Now, I like one-page fingering charts, but this is a chart that shows you the notes, and it shows you the fingerings of the notes. You don't have a staff in here, which I think is too bad, because you'd like to see the notes on the staff. Oh, yes, it does. It's in the middle. if I show you this, just one page, the notes are in the middle. There is a staff in the middle, and then you have one set of fingerings on top, and you have one set of fingerings on the bottom. Why two? It's because this book is showing you how to play not just the soprano, but the alto and the bass as well. And so they show you the differences of fingerings between those two instruments. The bass and the alto don't have the same fingerings as a soprano, but the soprano is most like most other instruments. It's a lot like most other instruments, and so therefore, and most people who are playing recorded, that's what they're playing. So this is an example of a fingering chart. Now, I have a much more advanced book here on the flute. This isn't a recorder, but it's a flute. And the music is very, very difficult and very advanced. There are some advanced books that do not have a fingering chart, and the reason being is that you already know the fingerings. But this particular one does. I just want you to see that this is an advanced book. This is not a beginner's book. And it does have a lot of really difficult music in it. Take a look at the scale work on this. You can see this is not a beginner's book by any means. But there is a fingering chart in the front of the book, and it's a little unwieldy, but I will show it to you anyway. I have to open pages for it. Here's one set, and I haven't got it completely open yet. Let's see, I'm trying to look at the monitor and see what I'm showing you here. And then if I want to completely show it to you, I have to add another page to it, and so I'll show you these pages more or less individually. Now, what person wouldn't be delighted to put all of this on a table and study it and study it and study it? It's a very, very extensive fingering chart. Hard to handle because there's so much of it. I would not put this on a student, you know what I mean? It's just very hard to handle. But it has a lot of information in it, and if you were an advanced student, you probably would do this page by page. So now I'm flipping over, and there's 2 or 3 more pages of this fingering chart. Let me fold this behind. More of the fingering chart. I can flip over another page. It continues, I think, for one more page. There it is. I think the only way you could really use this would be to take everything out, put it on some foam board, and lay it out on a table, because it's 2 or 3 pages, several pages folded up. It's not that it's not accurate, it's that it's hard to use. And most advanced books, and this is an advanced book, doesn't have a lot of fingering charts in them or any at all, because they figure by the time you're playing advanced music, you already know the fingerings for all of the notes. But that's one that does have it. So I'm going to show you some examples of fingering charts that I have taken, or that I have actually done myself. This here is a fingering chart that I wrote out myself, and the reason I did it, there's no keyboard to it. Usually I like to add a keyboard, but what I wanted to show, here's your note, here's your fingering, okay? Now, like for example, I'm going to show you this F. I've got 2 fingerings. Why? Because you have a German fingering and you have a Baroque fingering for the F. This is going to be the Baroque, I can tell just by looking at it, and this is going to be the German fingering. The German fingering is a little easier to play than the Baroque fingering, but most people, when they're playing recorders, are playing Baroque. The reason is that the pitch is a little tiny bit more accurate. It's not that the German isn't accurate, but this is just a little bit more. And so I have on this side the double fingerings for Baroque and German on the lower F, and then I repeat that as we go up. This one you're going from D down to C. This one you're going from C up to D. I did it that way because if you're playing a scale, you can go from a higher note to a lower note and back up again, and usually that's what happens when you're playing a scale. So the fingering chart is this up here. All of these fingerings are used to show you what the fingerings are. I didn't include all the notes. I went up to that high D, but of course you can go up to C, but I didn't include that because in teaching, I wasn't going to be doing those higher notes until they had a good grasp of the notes that were easier. Now this chart I have used before. I've made a series of fingering charts where you can see the instrument. I have drawn it with a mouthpiece and a little bit of a bell. And when I do that, we'll see if that can come in clear. I've got a number of these. Good, that's great. So you can see this is the C. This would be the recorder. It doesn't look much like a recorder, but it's like the shape of a recorder. And you can tell this is going to be the upper, this is going to be the lower. This little circle here is going to be the thumb hole. This is going to be the mouthpiece, and this is going to be the bell. A lot of times you'll see music where you don't have the instrument sketched out. You just have a series of fingerings, and then this is when the same as this, except I have all the holes covered. So this is commonly used in fingering charts, just so you get a chance to see that. Now, let me flip that picture. When I first started teaching, I focused basically on that B, A, G, F, E, D, C. These are the basic notes. And let me just take the recorder here, and I'll go over that with you. I spent a lot of time when I first started teaching. B, A, G, bag. F, E, D, fed. So bag, fed. And the reason I did it that way is that it's easier if you use words, if you can, for students to remember it. And the left hand goes on top and the right hand goes on the bottom. And you have a scale, which is an octave scale, is 8 notes. However, if you can play those 6 notes, you've got most of it. Then you can get to other notes that are above and beyond it. So I did spend a lot of time just showing the B and how you finger it. And those little blackened circles beside the main group of notes would be the thumb hole in the back. So here you have it. A lot of times you'll have a note, and they will have the 3, that would be B, A, G. This would be the F. If it's a Baroque fingering, this would be the F because you add that extra note. These are all the blackened areas of the notes that are closed, and then you have that little circle on the left, and that is the thumb hole in the back because that's not closed for all the notes, but it's closed for quite a few of them. So going on from here, just to show you, most of the fingering charts go on this kind of a pattern, these 3 pattern. Here it is, the straight, the notes B, A, G, F, E, D. This little line in the middle separates the left hand from the right hand. That's the reason it's there. This would be the upper left hand, the lower right hand, and this is the tone hole in the back that you put your thumb on. Now, not all recorders are straight up and down. Some of them actually curve a little. So I've made a notation of that, and some of them have double holes, not all of them. So I want to show you something about this because you're going to notice it on recorders, and you may end up by wanting to know why. Here we have 2 double holes on the bottom of this instrument. This one right here and right below it. That's practically on the bell. Why are they there? They're there because it's easier for you to play sharps and flats with it. So when you half hold something, here's my D, here's my D sharp. It's a half a step higher. It's made easier to get because as you're half holding it, you can just go from one hole to the other hole. Just pull it over. You don't have to take it off. Just pull it over. The same C and C sharp would be the same. So you have, some of them have just one set of double holes. Some recorders have two sets of double holes. The nicer ones have two sets. But that does not continue all the way up to the tone holes. It doesn't. So when you get to like G or A, it is harder to get that half step, but you can do it. And you have to get in practice for it. But there wouldn't be enough space to keep double holes all the way up. But if they were able to do that, say until the A or the B, then it would be easier to get the half steps. But these here holes are quite tiny, you know, and there is room for them. Now, if you take a German recorder, as I have here, there are no double holes. That hole is just one hole. But it doesn't make any difference in terms of its playing. I'm going to try to get it so you can actually see it as the light reflects off from it, because it's dark. So, okay, we got it. But it doesn't mean that you can't play your sharps and your flats. You just don't have the extra hole to help you out. So you can still do everything on these German recorders that do not have, or on any recorder that does not have the double holes. It doesn't limit you in any way. But the thing is, it is a help to have those double holes. And even the less expensive instruments are now coming out with these double holes. It used to be that the older ones and the less expensive didn't have them. Now here's an actual fingering chart that I just took out of a book, and this is a recorder. The picture of it with the left hand on top, they show you 1, 2, 3, so you know the fingerings, and then they have the double holes on the bottom. They have marked that so that the circle around the double holes is a little darker so it's easier to see, and this is the right hand. Here's the note on the staff. Here's the fingering of that note on the staff. The only thing that's lacking, but you don't really need it, would be a piano keyboard so you could see where that falls on a piano. But you don't really need it to learn how to finger the note. This comes from a recorder book. It really is a very good fingering chart. Some of them I like. Some of them I think are just too complicated. Now here's one that's more complicated. And what you did, this goes into the sharps and flats. This is like the chromatic scale: C sharp, E flat, E sharp, F natural, G sharp, A natural, A sharp, B, and so forth. It goes through the chromatic scale. This just goes through the regular scale, and it shows you your fingering on the bottom, pretty much like what I've shown you before, with the indication that if the hole is not blackened in, you leave that space open. That's an open hole. You close the hole if it's darkened in. And then this is kind of like a half hole, but I don't know anyone that can hold the middle part of a hole and not cover the rest of it. So that's a fingering chart. I'm going to move on from here. This is a flute fingering chart, and here you have the notes. This goes up to an F. Now, the flute can actually go up to a C. It doesn't take you up that high. Because it's a beginning book, those notes are kind of hard to get. But what it does is it's like it lays the flute on the side. You have the note, And you know how you hold a flute. You hold the flute like on the side, and because you're not playing it up and down like you do like a recorder. So this is going to be the holes in the back, the octave mechanism in the back, and this is going to be the fingering of the note. And it's shown the way that you actually play it because you're holding it out on the side. So that's a flute fingering chart. Now, here's a fingering chart. I actually started working on it myself. I take the picture of the flute, and then I darken in the notes that you're going to push down so that those tone holes are covered. They're covered by keys. You don't have keys on most of the recorders, although on some you'd have a little. And the open and so forth. And so the note, the way that you finger it, and you have the actual picture of the flute, and I kind of stopped working on it, not because there's anything wrong with it, it's fine, but you have an awful lot of notes to cover, and when you're covering that many notes, you can't cover it in one page, and so therefore you're thinking about page after page after page. There are some books that do that. Whoops, I had 2 pages here. I'll skip that, but you understand what I was doing and why I was doing it. Whoops. If I can get this to open the way I want to. Here was a table of trills. Now, this is a clarinet. And what they have done with the clarinet, this is the back of it, and you have the mechanism. It's not an octave, but it's a mechanism that gets you into the higher register. And you can see this is what you would press this key, and then you would have this tone hole that you would cover. Remember, all of the for the most part with the clarinet, they're all open holes. They don't have a covering like the keys like you have for a flute or a saxophone. But what I want you to really pick up on is all of the keys have numbers on them. And then when they show you the notes, and then they mark the numbers of the keys that you need to be pressing down to play that note. It's a fairly complex system. It does work, but it is kind of complex. A new student would have trouble with it, and so we wouldn't be using that. And notice that they call it a BAM clarinet. You have BAM flutes and BAM clarinets. Now, here are some forms that I use for fingering charts. This is a simple one that I have. This would be the mouthpiece, this would be the bell, this would be the tone hole in the back, the thumb hole, and these are all the tone holes that you have in the front that you cover for the notes. Then I started getting a little bit more complex, and I started drawing this. It looks more like a flutophone than a recorder, actually, but what I was trying to get with it, I was trying to get where are the thumb hole in the back? When is it covered? When is it not? When is it half-holed? And I thought if I drew it like that, I would be able to show you when the back thumb hole is covered and when it's not. So that was a form that I used. Now this is an interesting one that I took from a book. It has a picture of the recorder and how you finger it. And then it has the notes on the staff, and then it labels all of the notes. Here's your C, and this is your C, and that's how you finger it. The mouthpiece and labium is clearly drawn, and then the tone holes in the front are clearly drawn. It doesn't have the thumb hole in the back, but at any rate, it's easy to read, and that's good. And I figured that one would be a good thing to show you. Now, here's a saxophone. I didn't bring in the whole book, but the saxophone is interesting because here again, it's really a nice drawing. You have the bell, you don't have the neck piece, but the only thing on the neck piece is going to be the octave mechanism, and you don't have the mouthpiece, but you're not using the mouthpiece when you're trying to figure out how to finger. All of the ones that you use are being numbered. You don't use these here. When you actually press certain keys, there are rods that push other keys down that you're not doing. It's the instrument is doing it for you. So you have these all numbered. And then I didn't bring in the whole thing, but you can see there are notes and the numbers and what numbers of the holes that you press down to get the note. It's a little bit complicated, but I do like that drawing of the saxophone. It really is very good. Let's see. It's easier for me to bring in pictures rather than bringing in all of the books. This we won't use either. It's actually a chart on playing chords on the piano. So what are we doing on time? We only have 2 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is continue this next time and go through the fingerings of all of the major notes, and I'm going to do it from a fingering chart that I have made up myself that shows you the whole instrument and yet shows you all of the notes and where to press and so forth. And I think it will be particularly helpful. So I will continue with this next time.